and that it is nevertheless widely respected among the public at large. And that so they see the ancient world as a powerful rhetorical tool for making their beliefs seem acceptable and respectable, which is really the goal of many of these platforms. And so the challenge that they pose is that they bring us face to face with the consequences of an idealizing, uncritical elevation of Greco-Roman antiquity. They bring us face to face with the consequences of classicism and the way of valuing antiquity that implies. And so as I realized this over time working on this material, I concluded that my original purpose of refuting or providing critical commentary on these appropriations was not as important as a project of self-reflection, which I believe they provoke in those of us who approach them without defensiveness, with epistemic humility, I think, maybe, to use a term from before. And this is why I have focused more squarely on documentation for the last few years. And that's why I designed the teaching materials I'm presenting today as I did. Now, over the years, I've heard from a lot of teachers who use my site in their classes. It's already happening. And this has only increased in the wake of the Capitol attacks. People are writing to me about using it in the class. So for a while, I've been trying to think about making my site more teacher friendly because A, I knew it was happening anyway, and B, I wondered if more people would be interested in trying it if they sort of had a framework for doing it. But at the same time, I had serious concerns that I think would be obvious to anyone who attends this conference. I was going to say I had serious concerns about student safety, but now I think the previous talk makes a good argument for considering what models of education are implicit in that. But about safety and trauma is what I wrote in my script. Since these sites, they exist to deprive people of their humanity and promote violence against them. And then there's also a danger on top of that of sharing these materials in the classroom, besides trauma, a danger of radicalizing students as well, of introducing them to arguments that may actually be attractive to them. And so I was a little unsure of how to approach this. And I guess I'm here because I'm still a little unsure, but I have started down the path. But last summer, Priya Jackson wrote her piece for Eidolon, Fight or Die, in which she wrote that white classicists must resist and do the work every single day to unlearn white supremacy in themselves, to unwrite the white supremacist narratives they discover, and to unteach the white supremacist ideologies they will invariably discover in students who approach classics as a white history, who have never been asked to challenge the lifetime of skewed representations they've consumed. And one of the things that Ms. Jackson wrote in this was that we should ask ourselves, how was or is the topic I study used by white supremacy? And so when I read that, I thought, well, that's a question that my site can contribute an answer to. And so it kind of actually, I was focused on what's the harm, what are the possible harms of bringing this material into the classroom, but I think Ms. Jackson made me think about that it's also harmful in a sense for our students to be unaware of this phenomenon. Being unaware of it allows the maintenance of many, at least allows the disguising of many white supremacist narratives about antiquity. So I guess I would say I went for it, and my purpose here today is to explain what I have released. And as I said, I really, in one way, I'm asking if it should exist, or maybe it should exist, but is too half-baked in its current form. And I also, so I want to ask, how can I address these risks more effectively? And also, if these materials are valuable, ask what materials would be useful to you in the future. There's two parts to what I'm presenting, what I've shared on my site. One is a set of thematically organized surveys of appropriations of Greco-Roman antiquity. I have a link to them there, but I'll share them in a second. The two I've released, one is a set of materials relating to Athens and Sparta, and the other is a set of materials relating to misogyny and gender. And then I also have a how to use Pharos in the classroom article that I wrote, which includes recommendations and principles for instructors and a set of discussion questions for analysis and reflection that are intended to lead to this kind of self-reflective practice that I think is the real value of this material. So I'll quickly, let's see, I'm gonna stop sharing that. I'm gonna put the two main things I'm gonna talk about here in the chat. I think Hannah already put them there, but oops, let me just see, make sure I do this to everyone. Panelists and attendees, okay. So a couple things are in the chat there if you want to follow along. And I'm going to share my screen. This is the window, I think. All right, so you should now be seeing my my site here. So first I'm going to talk about the thematic surveys. I'll focus on the Athens and Sparta one here. I mean, the misogyny and gender one is intended for use in courses on ancient gender. Which a lot of attention has come to because of Donna Zuckerberg's book. And as a result, misogyny and gender is something that quite a few people have written to me asking for a collection for. And then I've also included this one on Athens and Sparta, kind of intended, I guess, for courses in Greek history or Greek civilization. And if we look through the page, what I have here after some introductory remarks, I have a set of essays from prominent white ethno-nationalist sites. I've organized them by site, I think because that allows me to kind of provide a little contextualization for them. This first one is an essay arguing that the Greeks and Romans were white in the sense that that term is used in the modern world. Here's one from a misogynist site about Sparta as a prototype of a society where men's lives were devalued by women, sort of the institutionalized devaluing of men's lives. Here's an article advocating ethnic cleansing based on Athenian example from Herodotus. Here's an article saying that white supremacists should be promoting Athenian-style sortition as a more kind of white-friendly system than electoral democracy. Here we have someone recommending Solonian-style debt repudiation as a beneficial practice for white ethno-nationalists. This is an essay on, it's actually a review of a book by a prominent politician in Greece, arguing that homosexuality was not socially acceptable in Greece. We have, here's an article about how feminism is bad for civilization. Here's an article about sort of a celebration of the Battle of Thermopylae from a prominent white supremacist site. And then I've got two essays here on Athens and the ancient polis more generally as models for white ethno-states. So, you know, that's a kind of gives you a flavor of the collection. All of these are about Athens and Sparta and, you know, could come up in the, you know, are things you could talk about in relation to a class where you've been studying the ancient city-states. I'll give you a little more detail about what I provide about each one with this first example on what race were the ancient Greeks and Romans. I give a little framework for understanding the site, kind of try to convey that this is a prominent and significant platform for this kind of thought. The link here is not to the site itself, but to a Wikipedia entry that describes it as a white supremacist site to kind of put a little authority behind my claim of it, a little description of its influence on the Trump White House and their ongoing activities, both online and in the real world. Then I give a summary of the article. The goal of having that summary is that maybe that's as close as some students want to get to the material. So just try to, you know, give enough that you could at least have a conversation about some of the ideas. In this case, there's a very good blog post refuting, not this specific post, but a lot of the sort of ideas about race and the use of evidence that comes up in this type of post. So I link to that there, but that's something I probably need to do a little more throughout where such materials are available.